Hey everybody, welcome back to another episode of Coffee with the Critters. Starting in March, we will have been doing our weekly episodic content every Sunday morning at 9 a.m. for 4 years. We have several things coming up, but before we get started, for those that are new, my name is Laura Joseph, owner of the Animal Behavior Center. We are an international educational center where we teach people all over the world how to empower the lives of their animals and themselves through working with applied behavior analysis and positive reinforcement. And we do that through our live streaming services. And you can find out more about that on our website, which is theanimalbehaviorcenter.com. So we do that, our membership services, there are live streaming services. It's like Coffee with the Critters, amplified big time and more specific, where we do live stream training, behavior, monthly Q&As, special guests, interviews, a lot of activities. So yeah, welcome. Hey, good morning, Sean. Good morning, Susie, Blorian. Hey, Blorian. Staying up late, I see. Jennifer, Jeannie, Donna, Sean, Judy, Adrian, Tim, Eva, Valerie. Okay, I could keep going on. Welcome back, everybody, and thanks for following along with us. Like I said, we have a lot coming up. February 21st, the Animal Behavior Center will be turning 6 years old. I can't believe we're only 6 years old and how far we've come in 6 years. So we will be doing something special for our 6-year anniversary. In March, we'll probably be doing something special for Coffee with the Critters, since it'll be our 4-year anniversary. A couple of upcoming guests. Today we have returning guest Laura Zitzelberger. She's Director of Operations from Nature's Nursery. It's a wildlife rehabilitation center in White House, Ohio, where I also volunteer my services. It's where Willie is from, Wiley. Let's see, we've had Jefferson in here, the Kestrel, Mary Lou the Crow. I'm sure much more than that, right, Laura? Anyways, so today we're interviewing Laura Zitzelberger. We'll be having a really interesting conversation, and I think this needs to be shared because a lot of people think they're doing good by feeding wildlife, and it's not that feeding wildlife is bad. Just know what you're doing and how you're doing it, and Laura's going to come on here and tell us and enlighten me too. So a couple of things we have coming up. Nancy Forrester at Key West, in Key West at Nancy Forrester's Secret Garden will be joining me. Well, she won't be joining me. I'll be joining her live from Nancy Forrester's Secret Garden in Key West next month. The month after that, in March, we have professional dog trainer and psychologist, Dr. Deb Jones, coming back on. She's coming to town. I believe it's the second weekend in March, because we are going to get started and get ready for our next all species animal training and behavior workshop, which is happening for the second year in a row in October. And if you have not purchased your seats, you might want to seriously, if you've been considering coming to the Animal Behavior Center and getting hands-on learning, you might want to really consider taking a look at that now, because the seats have already started selling. And seating is limited. You can find that on our website, theanimalbehaviorcenter.com, and just look under, I believe it's events. What else? I will be in Montreal 2 weeks from today. What sane person goes to Montreal in February? That would not be me. But I'm giving a 2-day animal behavior and training workshop up there, and I might be making another stop after that, coming back. And in March, have been asked for the second year to co-lecture Dr. Jason Crane's Zoo Biology and Genetics college course out of St. Xavier University. I will be presenting out there as well. We have another workshop coming up in April, which we will be live streaming. Okay, so for anybody that wants to get a hold of me, you can always reach me at my email address, which is laura@theanimalbehaviorcenter.com. I answer each and every email, which takes me a long time, but I prefer to do it myself. Good morning, everybody. Thanks, everybody, for tuning in. Before I bring Laura on, I am going to just do a recap for those who watched last weekend's Coffee with the Critters. Know that Rocky, our 20-year-old Moluccan cockatoo, was asked to be in several shootings of 4 upcoming commercials coming out, airing mid to end March. I'm not at liberty to say too much until it airs, but we just got back from being on set Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, and we got home Thursday, and what an experience that was. Oh, I forgot that graphic. If you're interested in our Livestream services, level 1 for companion animals, these are weekly live streams. Level 2, more focused for those in the field of animal training and behavior or wanting to be in the field. And we have live streamed interviews with professionals, all kinds of stuff. And then we have the Parrot Project, which is species specific. Okay, so Rocky was just in a commercial, well, 4 commercials that will be aired. And it was such a cool experience. And I did this. I didn't even have Rocky in mind when they asked me to do this. I was getting ready to put them in touch with some people that I know in New York, New Jersey, and Utah. But once they started explaining what they were looking for in this commercial, I actually started laughing and said, what you're wanting is exactly what one of the birds we have here would thrive off of getting. And that is Rocky. And he did it very well. And I agreed to do it because I thought it would be very enriching for him, and it proved to be so. So here's Rocky in one of the commercials. And if you want to see more photos, go take a look at our Facebook page, because I did a timeline snapshot of what was involved every day. So here's some scenes from behind this, some shots from behind the scene in one of the sets. He just really thrived off the attention. We got him to do different things on cue. We had some minor complications where we had to bring in the producer because Rocky was so interested in the producer. And a lot of the time, when we were off set, he just sat on my shoulder and we watched the shooting of the scenes from behind. Rocky stayed quiet and he just wanted to see what was going on. He really enjoys engaging with people, and that is why I chose to do this for him. And he did it very well. Here he was very interested in one of the stand-ins on the right in the glasses, and there's the makeup artist coming in between shots, powdering her nose and touching up her lipstick, and there's Rocky being extremely nosy, wanting to figure out what exactly was going on. Here's some shots showing the producers and the cameraman from Rocky's point of view. And these were 2 full days of 12 to 14 hours a day of shooting. And every time Rocky would hear rolling, that meant everybody be quiet, and all the actors and stand-ins need to be doing what they're doing. And this is Rocky and I from our room, and when he would hear the word rolling, when he wasn't on set, he'd run out and try to get on set. So that let me know how much Rocky was enjoying this. Here's a picture behind the scenes from the first night when he was on the green screen. And like I said, would I consider doing more commercials with more of the animals here? Yes. And you know why? Because it forced me to try more intently and get them ready. And it made the relationship between Rocky and I just skyrocket beyond what I ever even thought was possible. So it was a great experience. And we came home to seeing this. Manager Karen Pratt put this on Rocky's food dish. So he's a great educator. So without further ado, let's go ahead and bring on Laura Zitzelberger, Director of Operations from Nature's Nursery. Nature's Nursery is a wildlife rehab center located in White House, Ohio. If you really want to educate yourself and do better with the wildlife in your backyard, I highly suggest supporting your local wildlife rehab center and volunteering. So let's go ahead and bring Laura on. Hey, Laura.
Hey, morning. How are you?
Good. How are you?
Good.
Thanks for coming back on again.
Yeah, no problem. I love listening to all that about Rocky.
It was a really cool experience. Yeah. And it's a piece of enrichment. I'm finding hard to match.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
So I know, Laura, I've had you on here before. We were talking, I think it was in the spring, and we were talking about not interfering with, I remember we were talking about ducks, not interfering with breeding season of wild animals.
Yeah. Spring bait, when to get involved and when not to get involved. Yep.
Yeah. And that was a very popular live stream. Yeah. You brought a lot of information to the public that people didn't know. Mm-hmm. And when we know better, we do better. And that's why.
Yeah, that's what we're here for, And so we always tell people there's no stupid question. Call us, and we'll help you with whatever we can. So.
Yeah. So, okay. And I think this was your idea. And I was like, this is a fabulous idea about dangers and precautions of feeding wildlife in the winter, but not only limited to the winter. Yeah.
Right.
So I know because like this morning here in Northwest Ohio, we are a very blustery 9 degrees.
Yeah.
And a lot of people feel sorry for the animals in the wild. And something that's really, I'll let you talk before I say anything, but I wanted to say something about the book review in level 2 because it's opening my eyes to domestic and undomestic animals.
Right. Yeah. I mean, what I would want to say to people is I'm not here to tell anybody they should not ever feed wildlife. I just came in from filling my bird feeders. So there are instances where it's okay to feed wild animals, but it's just, I think a lot of people from the time we were kids, and I would trudge over to Oak Openings Park with a loaf of bread and feed the ducks when I was a kid. Like you said, when we know better, we do better. And we're learning so much more about the effects of us feeding wildlife, the negative effects it has on them, not just to that individual, but generations, actually. We're learning more and more that it's affecting future generations when we do this. So it's important that if we're going to do it, we do it right.
Yeah. And that's why you're here, is to figure out how to do it right. Because I know a lot of people just want to throw bread out for the ducks and the wild birds, and whatever types of food they're putting out for the squirrels, the chipmunks, the raccoons. Yep. So do you want to start off by maybe, because I know when I was a kid, I went to the park and threw bread out for the ducks, the geese.
Yep.
What's the danger there?
I mean, basically, I love bread, but bread isn't even all that good for people. It certainly isn't a good diet for wildlife. And not only is it just not good for them, what happens is they're not a whole lot different from us. They like to eat what tastes good. And usually the things that really taste the best to us are not the things that are the best for us. And so what happens is not only do they fill up on the bread, they stop eating the things that they should be eating. And some studies have shown that, especially when it comes to waterfowl, even a few days of eating a diet high in things like bread and other, starches that don't have a lot of nutrients, it can have a long-term effect on that bird's health. Especially in the springtime, we see it with young birds that develop angel wing, where their wings become, disfigured as they're growing because the bones are being affected. And so it's not just a harmless thing, it actually has huge effects for them.
Sure. So with angel wings, I've seen it in parrots where their wings kind of flip up in the back.
Yep.
That can that can put them in danger with not being able or impacting flight from them to fly away from predators?
Exactly. Yes. And if, at Nature's Nursery, if we start to see angel wing in any of the young ducks that come in or the young Canada geese that come in, we can do some things to correct it. We can make sure they're getting a proper diet. We can actually tape their wings so that we can correct the disfigurement so that the wings will develop properly. But if people are putting bread out at ponds and along the river, those birds don't have that opportunity, and those wings just continue to flip, and then you have a lot of disfigured birds that can't function out in the wild.
Does that disfigurement pass on down to their offspring?
It won't pass on. It's something that's specific to them. And we can talk about this either now or later, but what we are finding is that with waterfowl, they leave the area, they migrate, many of them, not because of the cold temperatures, they can handle the cold temperatures. They migrate for food sources because they should be eating a lot of the vegetation and the insects and things that are in and around water. So many of them leave because of that. We're artificially keeping a lot of waterfowl in the area, and that does transfer down to future generations. If we have a generation that doesn't leave when they should, then their offspring are taught not to leave. And we're really disrupting the whole cycle.
Yeah, disrupting the ecosystem.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, Julie asked if we can show a picture of angel wings, and Laura and I were just talking about this before we went live. I was like, I actually should show some pictures of some angel wings. But what I'll do is, and maybe when this live stream is over, Laura, you and I feel free to come back in here and throw up pictures of what we're talking about. I'm just jotting down angel.
And they think that these birds have broken wings, and what they're actually seeing is angel wing. Again, and the problem is once it has occurred like that out in the wild, we can't correct it once it comes into Nature's Nursery. So quite often when those animals come into Nature's Nursery, our only option is to humanely euthanize because we can't fix it once it's gotten to that point.
Sure. So with you saying having to humanely euthanize for the things that the public is unknowingly doing, that is passing on to future generations, just keep in mind, do these future generations may have to be euthanized as well because of the disfigurement?
Yeah, not the actual angel wing won't be passed down to future generations, but the behaviors of keeping them artificially in this area, that will be passed on, which probably has more ramifications than we even know at this point.
Yeah, the future will tell.
Yeah.
So Tim Sparks just posted a link showing angel wings. I can't see it until we click on the link, but the viewers here, you can click on it and take a look at what we're talking about. Because if you take a look at those photos, it may look familiar.
An angel wing can be caused from different things. It can be a genetic issue aside from the feeding. It can be due to lack of proper sunlight, and then it can be due to poor diet. We can't affect, the genetics of these animals. We can't necessarily affect how much natural sunlight they're getting, which we usually don't see that cause in a wild situation. All we can do is control what we have an effect on, which is their diet, and not giving them things like bread and popcorn and stuff like that.
Okay. And we want to talk about a lot more animals here too, but we have a couple questions coming up, Laura. Mm-hmm. Kimberly brings up a good one, and I could put some input on this. It's kind of a tricky, touchy subject. She says, why not find a sanctuary instead of euthanizing? That's easier said than done.
Much easier said than done. First of all, we have to follow a lot of federal laws. So whether we can transfer a bird to another facility has to be approved on an individual basis through U.S. Fish and Wildlife. Not a lot of places want mallards and Canada geese because there's so many of them. And if you think of an organization like Nature's Nursery, this past 2 years, we've taken in about 2,800 animals. just in 1 year. About 55 to 60% of those go back out into the wild. The rest of them will die or have to be humanely euthanized. There's no way to place all of those animals that can't survive back out in the wild. And so sadly, the more common animals are the harder ones to find placements for. If it's a real unusual animal, someplace might want it for education, but there's just not a lot of facilities that are just taking in Canada geese and mallards and things like that.
Yeah, and like you said, these are native wildlife. There's rules and regulations to follow that you have to follow.
Right.
So
Nature's Nursery is licensed by the state to take care of mammals and by the state and the federal government to take care of birds. So that means every single individual that comes in, we have to keep records on it. We have to inform them why it came in, what is the situation with it, whether it died, was euthanized, or whether we want to try to transfer it.
yeah, and something else that comes in mind, because I've spent a lot of time at Nature's Nursery volunteering, I get to see a lot of what behind the scenes. Your hands can be tied by funding.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
You know, it's easy to say, why not, do this or do that. But when you have limited funding, and a lot of your funding is from the public.
Exactly.
Yep.
Mm-hmm.
So if we want to help do better, we can also donate.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
I've always said we get by on the kindness of strangers, and the services that we provide, we don't get any state dollars, any federal dollars. In fact, I just wrote a check for our permit. We pay to be able to have the privilege of taking care of wildlife. So, yeah.
Yeah. And I know your staff, well, I don't even know if we want to go there.
Yeah.
But a lot of things are a lot easier said than done. But somebody else had a question, and not necessarily, I want to touch on this. How does it harm? It's Jackie Waters asked this, but how we feed harm the future generations in malnutrition?
Again, the malnutrition itself isn't passed on to future generations. What an article that I just read, what it's saying is that by us artificially feeding waterfowl, many of them are staying around throughout the season that would have normally migrated. Not that these guys, we get birds from further up in Canada that come down here for the winter. Some of the ones from here migrate out and go down south. It's all in a transfer of looking for food. When we keep them artificially here, becomes a learned behavior that they then pass on to teaching their offspring, and we get them so that they're not doing what they were really designed to do. And so that's where it gets tricky to be feeding them. We have much longer term ramifications because we're interrupting what they would normally do in life.
Yes. Before we go any further, Jeannie says, can you post the link to Nature's Nursery for a donation? If you guys would like to make a donation, there you go. Yeah. All right. Somebody else had a question, which will just lead us right into the next animal we wanted to talk about. And that was Carrie. I feed the deer at my house. What negative impact does that have on them? Very responsible of you to ask.
Yeah. Okay. There's a lot of things to take into consideration when you're feeding the deer. If you're putting out food that you're going to be feeding raccoons and skunks and opossums and that type of thing. Always look at it from quite a few different angles. Is it a food that is okay for them? Apples are okay for deer. It should be a treat, not something that for any of these animals, not deer specifically. It should be something that's kind of a treat for them. It shouldn't become their meal. You need to take into consideration, are you causing them to gather in numbers larger than they normally would? Because anytime you're putting out food and animals are gathering together to eat that, you risk more opportunity to spread disease. You risk more opportunity for them to start having conflicts with each other. And then you risk them becoming a nuisance to people living around you. And that is always a negative thing for that animal. Once animals start to collect in larger numbers than they normally would, not everybody likes them as much as you do. And then they start doing things to make sure that doesn't happen. So, and then the other issue is making sure that they don't associate you with the food, because when they start associating people as a food source for them, they become desensitized to us. And again, not everybody's as nice as you. And they may do things to deer or other animals that are going to come up and be closer to people than they should.
Yeah.
There's a whole array of things that you kind of have to take into consideration.
Sure.
Drop a few apples so that you can see the deer. I don't think that's a big deal in my personal opinion. But if it becomes a regular thing and a lot of those other factors fall into it, you just have to think about that.
Yeah, Lisa makes a comment. My mom always fed the deer, but it wasn't healthy. They become dependent and aren't foraging, and they can't survive. And they're probably putting their offspring in danger.
Exactly, because also you have to take into consideration that a lot of species of animals will, and maybe you think the few things that you're feeding aren't a big deal, but a lot of species, if the food supply is very, very plentiful, they're going to have more babies in the spring. And then it starts to kind of compound on that. And so if they're getting an artificial diet that isn't normally there, then when you stop, you've got these animals that have now become kind of reliant on that. And so you just have to think about that. Like I said, to chuck out a few apples once in a while because the deer pass through and gives you an opportunity to get a better look at them, I don't think that's a big deal, but you really shouldn't do it on a regular basis, and you shouldn't do it so that they're seeing you as the food source.
Sure. We get a lot of crows and jays around here. We do have some deer. I know we have some fox, great horned owls.
Yeah.
I love to see those animals. I especially love to see the crows and the turkey vultures. We have a lot of crows around here, and it's really cool to watch the dynamics throughout the year. Mm-hmm. I love crows. Doesn't mean my neighbors are going to love crows. Right. Crows can be seen as pests. So, well, all the animals can be seen as pests. Right. But the ones that are most popular, and you tell me if I'm wrong, are the animals that are seen as pests most are squirrels, crows, rats. And it's because, in my experience, they adapt. They're manipulative, and they easily outwit us. Right. We try to keep them off our feeders, but what we're actually doing is just increasing their level of complexity of foraging.
Right. We seem to be most annoyed by the animals that do well living around us. The ones that are more delicate and we don't get to see very often, we're just very excited about those. But the animals that have learned to live and become our neighbors and share our space with us really annoy us. And, again, one person may just love having the squirrels come to their feeders, and their next door neighbor gets frustrated every time a squirrel shows up. And which always kind of cracks me up, like the squirrels are supposed to know that those are bird feeders and not squirrel feeders. But, everybody's got a different perception of every species of wildlife. I don't think I've ever done a program for Nature's Nursery where somebody hasn't raised their hand and said, well, what good's a woodchuck or what good's a chipmunk? Everybody has something that bugs them. And if you're causing those animals to gather around people, it could be if your neighbor doesn't like them. So,
yeah. Okay. What about, let's talk about rats.
Rats. Rats are an animal that you don't want them to get started in your area. And that's the problem with feeding other animals, because rats are very opportunistic. And whether you've just got some bird feeders and the seed is dropping to the ground, if you're not keeping that cleaned up,
the rats will keep it cleaned up.
Yeah, the rats will be glad to keep it cleaned up. And the problem is with rats is once rats get started in an area, in my opinion, they're one of the hardest animals to get under control, and that can start really causing direct problems for people. And I'm not here to vilify rats in any way. It's just they're an animal that is so incredibly intelligent, and trying to deal with them once they get established can be extremely frustrating, and people then tend to resort to methods that are not very humane, and not very humane for the rats and also for any other wild animals that may be around. So that's a problem you want to stop before it ever gets started. So
yeah, because once you get the problem.
Yeah, if you're putting out food because you like to, give food to the raccoons that come to your backyard because you think they're interesting, just know that it may be drawing in other animals too.
And if I know a big concern here is because we have a large wooded lot next to us. We live in a 100-year-old farmhouse, and we have a 10,000 square foot center right out back that has 15 residents, where we're feeding an array of different types of food. From, we're feeding fruits, vegetables,
yep,
pellets, mice, chicks, smelt.
Yep.
So
all the things that rats like, they love it all. So
yeah. So I know you said we had a problem here in Toledo with rats. Did you?
Yeah. Actually, I'm hearing from not just Toledo, but the different suburbs and everything that in fact, different municipalities are starting to put out different regulations based on whether you can even have a bird feeder and that kind of thing, because of situations with rats. So, and then it gets very controversial because, they do start to kind of take over, and then certain municipalities are wanting to do things like put out poison and those horrible sticky traps and things like that. And so it's just better to do the things ahead of time to make sure rats are going to live out there. We just don't want to encourage them to be living up and around our houses. That's where the problems are going to start. Yeah.
And another thing, I don't know, did you mention this? Like, if you poison the rat goes outside and dies, right, then the vulture or the opportunistic feeder.
Yeah. Any of the hawks, the owls, the vultures, cats and dogs, they eat one of those rats, they are then poisoned as well. So, and when you're putting out poison for rats, you don't know if a chipmunk's going to eat it or if a squirrel's going to eat it or any other animal. So there's so many ways that can go wrong.
Yeah. What are some other animals or other dangers of feeding?
I mean, I think the most typical feeding that goes on is bird feeders. And the thing I always tell people with putting out seed at bird feeders, which I do, I have probably 7 or 8 bird feeders here, but I don't fill 7 or 8 bird feeders. I have a set amount of food that I put out every day, and when it's gone, it's gone. And so the birds aren't relying on me. It's just something to, so, actually it's a very selfish thing on my part. I like to see the birds at my bird feeders. So I put seed out. It doesn't become their diet. It's something to, enhance or to kind of give them a treat. And that's where I think people, they start getting more birds, so they start putting out more seed. And then more birds come, and so then they put out more seed. And same thing with the squirrels. And I've had people not only call because they were getting ready to move, and now they're worried because they have these huge numbers coming to their feeders
that depend on them.
Would be cut off right away. And that can affect if you're putting out a huge amount and these birds are starting to rely on it. And with squirrels, a lot of people are doing that, and then also trying to get the squirrels to come closer and closer. And then you've got squirrels that are hanging on your door when you go in because they've gotten so used to people. So again,
you can tell those squirrels that are used to people where you walk out and you're like, whoa, hey, somebody's even feeding you.
Right. Well,
in my lap.
Yeah, we had somebody call us recently about a squirrel that was hanging around their yard, and it was kind of trying to come up to people. Didn't seem to be sick or anything like that, which you never want to assume they're not. But the sad part is, again, some people really like squirrels. These people actually saw somebody throw a cup of coffee on the squirrel when it came too close to them. So you're not doing them a favor if you're making them comfortable around people.
Yeah. And if you guys have questions, go ahead and ask them. I'm trying to scroll through because there's been a lot of comments, but it's hard for me to keep up because they come in so fast. So if you have a question for Laura, go ahead and post it. Okay. Beth says, how do you deter woodchucks from burrowing around house and buildings?
There's a lot of things you can do depending upon the situation. And I always tell people, feel free to call Nature's Nursery so that we can talk about the specifics, your specific situation. But if you're seeing where there's digging going on, you can take ammonia soaked rags and put those just at the entrance of the hole. They don't like that smell, and they'll start to see that as not a good place to be. You can, if you don't have dogs or cats that are going to get into it, you can do a light sprinkling with a little hot pepper. They get a little snootful of that. They don't like it, and it deters them from going to those areas. So there's a lot of little things you can do. You can put out things that make them on edge all the time. Those little pinwheels, a foil pie tin tied to a string that's going to bang around. Those things will all just keep them on edge so that they start to realize, okay, maybe I don't want to be in this spot. And it's always better to try to deter wildlife that is a potential nuisance to you rather than trapping it and removing it. Wildlife does not do as well once they've been moved to an artificial location that they're not familiar with. So whenever you can get them to move along on their own, that's always the better option.
Yeah, because one of the times I was attending the Ohio Wildlife Rehabilitators Conference, there's regulations, aren't there, about trapping and picking up and moving the animal far distances?
Right.
There's dangers in that too.
Yeah, you don't want, and there's reasons for those regulations. You don't want possible disease being transmitted. A lot of times people will call us because of a fox in their area that has mange, and we are very hesitant. We don't want to bring it to Nature's Nursery to treat it because it would have to go into an outdoor cage, and then we risk passing that on. And that's the same thing if you're trapping an animal and moving it to another location. Something that animal might have, you may be introducing it into an area that doesn't occur. And so again, there are regulations that tell you what you're allowed to do and what you're not allowed to do legally. And you don't ever want to take an animal you've trapped and dump it in one of the metro parks because you'll get in trouble for that.
Yeah, there's a lot of things people are not aware of that they can get in trouble for.
Right. Wildlife is considered the property of, in the case of mammals, it is the property of the state of Ohio. In the case of birds, it is the property of U.S. Fish and Wildlife. And so even, we tell people we have permits for this because if you want to raise a baby bunny, even if your intention is to let it go, you're breaking state law if you do that. If you raise a baby robin, even with the intentions of letting it go, you're breaking federal law. And there's reasons for that. They don't want people exposing themselves to disease and parasites from wildlife that they don't know anything about. And they don't want wildlife being raised improperly to survive back out in the wild. And so that's the reason there's these rules.
Yeah. And you're habituating these animals to people. And just from volunteering out there and hearing you guys on the phone, you have educated me so much. A lot of people just want to take in the baby bird and feed it, and they feed it what they think they should be feeding it. Right. And then they let it go and it just gets eaten by a hawk.
Yeah. Well, and that's, and even if you're feeding it all the right things, like you said, there's so many things that go into raising a wild animal more than just the diet. Even if you're feeding it all the right things, if you're not giving it the exposure to things it needs exposure to, or if you're exposing it to things it shouldn't be exposed to. We had somebody, call us, and they had been taking care of a baby crow. And they said, and it's the cutest thing. It likes to ride on our dog's back, but we're not sure
Wow. Lori, you just
What
cut
we
out.
need.
Can you go back? You just froze for a second.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I was just saying that,
The baby crow.
we had somebody raising a baby crow and they thought it was wonderful that it liked to ride on their dog's back. That's not a good thing for any wild animal. We'll have people show up, and I understand it's very hard to raise a baby animal and not give it too much love and affection. We're raising hundreds of baby animals. We don't give them too much love and affection. We are giving them what they basically need. It's very hands-off. They go into outdoor cages and they get experiences in outdoor cages away from us before they ever get released. And so there's just a lot more that goes into it than what people think.
Sure. And I want to tell you a story. And Laura, I know I told you this story. This is a big no-no I did before I knew I was doing any better. But I want to make sure Kelly Montgomery just said she brought something up very important. My father is a vet in Findlay, Ohio. A guy hit a baby deer on a combine years ago. My dad treated its broken leg and was released and got a $10,000 fine. He did not have a wildlife license.
Yeah. It's, just because somebody is a veterinarian, they have to, we have a vet that works with us. He's covered under our permits. And again, we can't have permits unless we have a vet willing to work with us. So there's a lot of factors that go into it. And you can have the absolute best intentions. And if, there's just so many rules that we have to follow.
Yeah, and they're on purpose. They're for a reason.
Right.
And because working with wildlife is not my area of expertise. So that's why when you come on here, I learn so much more. By attending the conferences, I learn a lot.
Yeah.
So just know what you're doing. And if you don't know what you're doing, call and ask somebody that does.
Right. Yeah, that's the biggest thing, that if I could get one bit of information out there, it's that, we're not here to judge. We're not here to make you feel bad about something that you've done. We're here so that you'll know better the next time. And, I'm not going to say that. I think probably for me, the most frustrating call isn't the person, obviously there's a lot of people that still don't know about Nature's Nursery. We've been around 30 years now, and there's still a lot of people that don't know about us. But what's frustrating to me is we'll get a phone call from somebody who says, who did know about us. And I'll say, why didn't you bring that animal to us sooner? And they'll say, well, I didn't know if it was going to make it, so I wanted to make sure it was going to make it first. That's what we're here for.
That's what you do.
Again, we understand that everybody's intentions are good, but you can kill an animal with kindness. So
yeah, you definitely can. And this was a story from many years ago, but I remember I contacted you and said, I screwed up, I did wrong. And I know I was feeding some, I believe they were sparrows in my backyards, some new hatchlings. And I was training this one that I named Pete, and I'm sitting there, Jake. I'm sitting here training this one. I was just like, how close can I get it to me? That's out of selfishness, Yeah. And that little bird became somewhat dependent on me. And because it was focusing on what I was training it or teaching it, it wasn't focusing on the hawk that was watching it. And that was his demise.
Yep.
So, yeah, I was just like, alrighty then. Not going to do that again. Leave the wild alone.
It's so funny because the calls we get at Nature's Nursery range from people who don't want wildlife in their yard at all, get that, a skunk walked through my yard, come get it, take it away, to there's a skunk in my yard with babies. What vet will descent one of them for me so I can keep it as a pet? And what we really work to do is get people to fall somewhere in the middle of that. Enjoy the wildlife out there, get a chance to see it at a distance. Don't become a part of its life.
Yeah. Okay. We got several questions on here. Okay. Lisa says you probably covered this, and we didn't. But what about heated bird baths if you keep it fresh and filled regularly?
Actually, yeah, Lisa, that brings up a good point. That's great to have bird baths out there, because, things do happen, especially throughout the, this part of the year where birds really have a hard time finding open water. And so, yeah, I think those are fine. The part you mentioned about keeping it clean, that goes true of our bird feeders and the bird baths. Bird feeding stations can become a harbor for lots of different diseases and parasites and things like that. So it's really important that if we put out feeders and bird baths, that we do keep them clean on a regular basis. We see conjunctivitis in house finches, which causes crustiness around the eyes, and that can be passed at bird feeders quite a bit. So especially if you see a bird at your feeders that appears to be sick or not doing very well, time to take the feeders down, clean them out really good, scrub them down, rinse them with a mild bleach solution and let them air dry before you put them back up again. So it's really important that we keep these things clean, or else we are going to make certain situations a lot worse. I don't put out hummingbird feeders because I don't trust myself to change the food in them every couple days in the summer, because if it's out in that heat, bacteria grows in that and it can make the hummingbird sick. If you can't trust yourself to keep feeders clean and get them changed frequently, then it's better just not to put them out.
Sure. Yeah. I mean, and I know here from just keeping the resident birds here, how dangerous bacteria and mold can be. Right.
And a lot of times we tend to look at wildlife, again, going back to bread, throw out bread, it's got some mold on it, it's not going to hurt anything. They're not really, these animals aren't really intended to be eating those mold spores either. And so, we think of them as being able to handle anything. And there's just a lot of things that human beings introduce into the environment that don't necessarily work for other animals. So,
yeah. Speaking of passing, I know in level 2 right now we just started reading we're getting ready to start reading a book on evolution of domestication, and it is an eye opener.
I just put it on my Audible.
Laura, you are going to love it. I'm just like, I was talking to my sister the other day. I'm reading a book on evolution of domestication. She's like, gee, that sounds extremely boring. But it's really opening my eyes to what I'm working with. And for any of you, we're getting ready to bring in a scientist that's worked on certain animals in this particular area.
I love level 2.
Thanks. Thanks. We've got some really good, cool things lined up for this year with interviews and just bringing a lot of interaction. Okay, if we want to feed the wild in the winter, I think you've already told us, but are there any other tips you can help us? If we want to feed, you said feed at a distance, don't make them dependent, make sure it's healthy food.
Right. Spread it out. Like I said, I've got 7 feeders. A little bit goes into each one. It keeps them not all in one space. For people that tend to put out feed and the squirrels gather, if you're noticing that you always used to have 3 or 4 squirrels and now you've got 12 or 15 squirrels, you're probably overdoing it. And what we see when that happens is generally we're going to start getting phone calls because one of them has shown up looking like it's kind of mangy, and now 2 are looking kind of mangy. Again, we tend to see mange in squirrels in the winter months because in the summer months, they're much more territorial about things. In the winter months, they'll nest communally for warmth a lot of times, and they start to spread, and mange is a mite. And normally they keep themselves cleaned of it and can groom it off of themselves, and it doesn't become an issue. If they're communally nesting, that mite can start to take over, and that's when you start to see the hair loss and the itchy skin and the scabs, and that's terrible in the middle of winter because these
You've
squirrels,
lost your insulation.
they're going to succumb to these elements. And, we had the same situation over in like Point Place years ago. We got a phone call from somebody who said, "Oh, we've been seeing some fox out near the golf course. What can we feed them?" And I said, "Don't feed them, because you're going to make their numbers increase. You're going to cause them to gather. They're going to become less concerned about people." And sure enough, that was in the summer. The next winter, we started getting phone calls, and there were so many fox in Point Place and in that area that had mange and looked terrible, and they were dying. And there wasn't really anything we could do at that point, because we couldn't bring all these mangy fox to Nature's Nursery for treatment. And so, and I firmly believe a lot of that started because people were putting out food for them because fox will come out during the day and they're not particularly afraid of people a lot of times. And they were putting out food so that they were helping them and so that they could see them closer. And they caused a huge problem. And it took months and months for this to run its course. And hopefully the population got nice and healthy again from what we were hearing. But a lot of fox died and suffered because of it.
Yeah, and probably a lot of golfers didn't want to see fox on their golf course.
Right, yeah. And again, it's not everybody has the same view of wildlife that you do. And so you really have to just look at your motivation, and are you doing it to truly add a little helping hand, or are you doing it because you want to try to feed a squirrel out of your hand and you want to be able to say it comes and trusts you and takes a peanut from you?
Selfishness.
Right.
Is what it comes down to. And
yeah.
I learned the hard way.
Yeah.
So you guys, I can't tell you how, I'm sure there's so many people. We've got 72 live viewers on here right now. I'm sure there's so many people out there, myself included, listening to this is like, ooh, I can see where I'm doing more damage than what is good. So
and we all have, all of us can be guilty of that. So
Tambry asks, can you put something in the food if you see a squirrel with mange to help treat it? Or should you just call your local wildlife center?
Yeah, I mean, that's a good question because, we take in mangy squirrels at Nature's Nursery. Again, it's a little bit different from when we get a call on a mangy fox, because squirrels we can quarantine inside our building away from everybody else. Fox, being a larger animal, would have to go into an outdoor cage and we would risk spreading it. Mange is very easy to treat. There is a medication you could put on food. The problem is you have to ensure that squirrel gets it. They would get it again in 2 weeks.
Hey, Lori, you're cutting out again, and you've got some very important information.
Okay. I'll kind of back up. Mange is very easy to treat, but it has to be given in the correct amount. It should be given 2 weeks later, and then usually again 2 weeks later. And so that can be really hard to do in a wild situation. You want to make sure that the right animal gets it, because the medication that we treat with can cause problems for certain dogs. If a dog ate that medication, it could be certain species of dogs or breeds of dog have a reaction to it. And we have also seen the medication cause seizures in an animal. If they have that seizure in a captive situation, it usually isn't life-threatening. But if that squirrel ate that food, climbed a tree, and had a seizure, it could fall and die.
Sure.
So we used to try to do that, but now we really want it done in a more regulated captive situation. So yeah, usually people have to live trap the squirrel. It comes out to Nature's Nursery and spends about the next 6 weeks to 8 weeks with us, and then it goes back to its home location for release.
Yeah. So, and Tim Sparks has been helping as you're talking, throwing out links and giving ideas. We have a lot of different followers on here that are very loyal and help us throughout the show, like Therese Copawoda, Karen Pratt, Adrian. So I want to thank everybody for helping us along. And I want to touch on a couple more things real quick, Laura, before we go. But one is I forgot. That's how important it was. This is such important information, and everybody's out there wanting to do better, wanting to do the right thing. I can't tell you enough. Share this live stream with them, have them watch it, let it be an eye opener, because we can do better through all knowingness.
Right. And, and if you have a group, a garden club, a scout troop, or whatever, Nature's Nursery does education programs, and we can talk on whatever topic is important to you. So it doesn't have to be, just one of our regular programs. We can talk on different topics. So if you want to have us come out and, do a talk to your group, we would love to do it. That's how we kind of support the rehab part of what we do.
You should do live streams.
Yeah, I know. I'm going to.
You do live streams for donations.
Yeah.
Because now your audience just opened up across the United States.
Yeah.
I've been friends with Laura Zitzelberger for several years. It started professionally, and I now consider you one of my closest friends. That I talk a lot with, but I learned so much from you. Before, Robin Hormans asked if you could talk about this briefly. Can you briefly talk about the view, quote unquote, I won't take it to the wildlife rehabber because they will just euthanize it, unquote. I'm sure there's a good comeback for this.
Yeah. I'm not going to say we don't euthanize animals. We do it way more than we would ever like. But our criteria has to be, I guess I'm a big quality of life person as opposed to quantity of life. And I think most wildlife rehabilitators are like that. I don't think that Nature's Nursery is different from most other rehabilitation centers. Our goal is to get animals back up. We didn't start doing this because we like to euthanize animals. It's just a part of what we have to do sometimes. And so we have to look at, can this animal survive back out in the wild? Because all these animals can't live in captivity just because they can't be released. So the decision does have to be made on a regular basis. But a lot of thought goes into it. And a lot of things that people don't think about. We may get a red-tailed hawk with an injury and then get a Cooper's hawk with that exact same injury. These things are very different. Red-tailed hawks are very calm and easygoing in a captive situation usually. Cooper's hawks should be in a padded cell. There's one at Nature's Nursery right now that I'm sure, I'm not there, but I'm sure it's banging around in this stainless steel cage.
I just laugh because I know I've seen what you're talking about.
So if these two animals come in with the same injury, the red tail, we may choose to treat the injury. The Cooper's hawk, we may choose to euthanize. And that's for that animal's benefit. The red tail soars in open areas, doesn't need the same agility as a Cooper's hawk. And the red tail is going to take the captive time much better than the Cooper's hawk may. So there's just so many things that go into making the decision. But I just want people to know a lot of thought goes into this decision, even if it's made fairly quickly. It's all based on our experience and what we feel is best for the animal. And I think it's really hard for people because if they find an animal, they feel responsible for it and they want it to live. And we want that for them, but it just can't always happen.
Yeah, so before you make a decision, ask. You see something concern, ask. Where do people go to find their local wildlife rehabber?
In Ohio, they can go to the ODNR website. They can also go to the Ohio Wildlife Rehabilitators Association. Both of those websites will have links to the list of licensed wildlife rehabilitators. And I really encourage people to make sure they do find a licensed wildlife rehabilitator. There's a lot of people out there who do this that don't follow all the rules and regulations, that aren't licensed, and it can cause problems all the way around. So, and if it's national, there's the National Wildlife Rehabilitators Association. They can go to their website and they can find, and they can always, if they live around, Nature's Nurseries area, they can call us. We've got a list of the directory. I've talked to people in Texas and Georgia and all over the country, and looked in our directory and said, here's who's close to you. So.
Yeah, and I know I've directed some people your way that are different parts of the United States. With that being said, for those that follow the work of the Animal Behavior Center are now getting to know you, Laura, because they saw you in the workshop. This is your second live stream here. A way you guys can ask, if you're not sure, go to Nature's Nursery's Facebook page.
Yep.
You do most of the posts on there, correct?
I do. And so
very engaging and interactive.
I do the posts. I'm usually the one that's going to respond to your questions on a private message, and I try to do it really quickly. And so even if you're not around us, I might still be able to help you with your situation, or at the very least, I can direct you to somebody who's closer to you if you need to get an animal to someone.
Yeah. Okay. I think that might be a wrap. You think? Is there anything else you wanted to say before we go?
Just, the part about Nature's Nursery, I think what people don't always understand is they think of us as an animal organization, which we are, but these animals don't come to us on their own. They come to us through people just like all of you out there. And so we are a people organization. We are here to help you help wildlife. And so when I always laugh when somebody comes to Nature's Nursery and they want to volunteer and they say, I don't really like people very much. I like animals. I'm like, well, you're in the wrong place then, because we deal with people all the time, and you can't always make the outcome that you want with the animal that you found. But I just want everybody to know that we really are concerned. We look at individuals. We know we don't affect populations. So we look at individual animals each and every day. And we really want to help people with whatever their situation is.
Yes, I agree. Thank you. A lot of people are saying, thank you, Laura, for this great information. I'd love to have you back on.
I love doing this. This is fun.
And, if there's certain topics that are like hot topics at the time, whether that's bats or whatever, let me know. I'll bring you back on and we'll get the information out there.
Yeah, and if anybody out there, if there's something they really have been wanting to know about, that might spur us to do a topic too. So, yeah.
So pay attention to Nature's Nursery's Facebook page, because they're going to be, they're thinking about doing some regular live streams, right?
Yeah, right. Under the guidance of Laura, she's going to get me started on this.
So if you guys want to reach out to Nature's Nursery, number one, go to their Facebook page. I would go to their Facebook page. It's a great way to reach out to Laura. Go to their website, natures-nursery.org, or you can also call them at 419-877-0060. Laura, thanks for coming on.
Thank you.
Can you bear with me while I get through a couple slides real quick?
Absolutely.
Okay. So if you guys are interested in things like this is what I do numerous times a week through our membership programs. Level 1, companion animal. We talk about behavior, training, enrichment. Level 2, more intense. We're talking about hot topics. Right now, we're into evolution of domestication, but definitely not limited to. We have interviews with different people in their area of expertise. And then we have another one, the Parrot Project, which is species specific to the parrot. And the Parrot Project is phenomenal, off the charts. So anyways, anything else? Oh, our book club, or book review is getting ready to start in level 2. Sign up for our email newsletter list. If you're here on our Facebook page, you'll see a link. We deliver content every other week. And in 2 weeks, I'll see you guys in Montreal. All right. With that being said, Laura, thanks again.
Thank you.
And I'll be in touch with you very soon. Everybody, thanks for attending.